Okay, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming along to this meeting of the Suffolk Public Sector Leaders. We do have an observer today, Marianne Overton, the leader of the independent group at Lincolnshire and North Kesteven Councils. And she is actually Vice Chair of the LGA and the Independence Group Leader, and she's here to observe West Suffolk Council's LGA Corporate Peer Challenge. So that was quite a bit of a mouthful. I'm sure they've had a great week up here under Cliff Waterman's fantastic leadership. She's gone. So she just came for the coffee then. She came for a photo. Photo op. Goodness me. We've received apologies for absence from Rachel Kearton, for whom David Skevington is attending as a substitute. Nicola Beach won't be here either, and Caroline Davison is here representing her. Ed Garrett and Sandra Graffam have also sent their apologies. Are there any other apologies? So we can now turn to the minutes of the last meeting. Does anyone have any corrections to make, please? So we're all happy with those. So we can move on to agenda item 2, the terms of reference. So I'll now invite Helen Pluck, who's the Chief Executive of Ipswich Borough Council, to present this item.
Thank you, Chair. There's a short paper on the agenda today. I was asked to carry out a light touch review of the terms of reference for SPSL, in particular to note the fact that the local enterprise partnership no longer exists and of course was involved in the partnership previously. So we have amended the membership and also added a section just to clarify the decision-making process for Suffolk public sector leaders, and there is a revised set of terms of reference attached with some track changes so you can see what's changed. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Mrs. Pluck. Are there any questions or comments on that? I think it's all very straightforward myself. So we're all happy to agree the revised terms of reference? So that is carried then. And we can move swiftly on to agenda item 3, Safer Streets Fund. So we now have a presentation from Liz Hollingworth following a previous investment into the Safer Streets project. So to Liz.
Actually, Neil, I'm just going to say a couple of words to introduce my colleague Liz Hollingworth, who's in charge of all our commissioning and grants in the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner. I'm going to leave most of this up to Liz. I just wanted to say, first of all, very, very grateful for the funding that came from the SPSL Pool Business Rates Fund of 150,000 quid that we agreed a while ago. And I really do want to emphasise that this was the 5th round, but the depth of collaboration with all the CSPs and other agencies, I think, is very, very good indeed, and really, really welcome that. In the past, as you know, Neil, we've done very well in Ipswich Borough, but getting applications, it's taken a lot of work for Liz and the team to do it. And whatever happens with the new government and funding streams, obviously we don't know at this stage, but it is an excellent example of where we can work together for the greater good. So I won't say any more. I just wanted to register the great appreciation we have for the support for this, and I will hand over to Liz to go through the papers with you. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting us along today. The slides are in the pack, so I'm not planning to go through them in great detail, but what we wanted to do to recognise the investment from public sector leaders was give you the update at this stage of the project. Our job in the PCC's office is to be the single point of contact with the Home Office. Hopefully that is taking some of the burden off our local authority colleagues who are actually running the project. So, and I do want to register my thanks to them because they're making my life as easy as possible in dealing with this big project, reporting on time, great collaboration. So the project's being delivered by the community safety teams in the local authorities, and part of the West project is being delivered by the police. Round 5 was quite different to previous rounds in that the funding comes through the PCC office. whereas previously local authorities have been able to bid directly. The projects are very specific in terms of the localities that they're addressing, and down to street level. The interventions and the areas were chosen based on crime and ASB data, and really importantly, that local intelligence from those working on the ground. The interventions were broadly prescribed, so again, quite rigid compared to previously, and they were prescribed by the Home Office on the basis of what works. So that evidence base of CCTV, targeted interventions, environmental changes, on the evidence that those interventions really work in reducing antisocial behaviour. So the match funding, we had to meet 50% of match funding. We're actually on course for 77%, which is great. And that's a combination of the public sector leader contribution of 150,000, some local authority investment and officer time and resource, plus the work of the PCC's office. So year one was October to March, and we successfully delivered. There was quite a lot of change from the Home Office. And again, I think it's testament to that collaboration that we worked it through. And that included a last minute pull of 180,000 from the Home Office. So we had to scramble to redesign the projects. But I think that, we're still quite proud of what we're going to be able to deliver. And it is all achievable. So the next slide shows the project summaries. We were able to get a grant of 111,000 from the Home Office, so 450,000 last year across the three areas, 355 this year, which reflects that slight reduction. The last box there, you can see the types of intervention that we're talking about. CCTV, very much across all three areas. I think the West is quite an interesting project in that they've gone for deployable cameras. So being able to move those cameras to the hotspot areas. Again, all three areas looking at outreach with young people. So slightly different formats, but very much about education, awareness raising, working one-to-one, behaviour change to try and reduce antisocial behaviour. Most of the delivery in last year was January onwards. So, we have started. There's still lots of planning, consultation and procurement in Q1 this year, and particularly for the delivery of CCTV in the East and Ipswich. So just on the East, the project's focused in Lowestoft. The new control room is in place, so quite a lot of delivery already in Q4 last year. What's happening this year is 27 new cameras with the Home Office funding are going in. That's being consulted on the siting right now. And already East Suffolk Council are reporting on the number of incidents dealt with. The interventions with young people, that's where the public sector leaders' money is going to go in. There's been great delivery in Q4, particularly with good results on the one-to-one and mentoring. And you can see there, one of the outcomes already, 80% of young people who received support have recorded changes in their attitude. The young people focus is around Witton, Kirkley and Gunton. And again, last year, over 100 young people benefiting in Q4 last year, and actually over 1,000 young people spoken to in assemblies. There's a bit of a pause in the young people's work just in terms of negotiations with the suppliers, but we are confident, East Suffolk Council is confident that that will resume in October, and the work in the community settings, so out and about rather than in schools, continues with Catch 22. So on to Ipswich. Progress so far, year one focused on the comms campaigns, bus adverts, digital notice boards, and that's all about acceptable behaviour in terms of antisocial behaviour, how to report ASB and the support available for victims, lots of work on illegal dumping and litter, bins, community resources, signage. This is all really practical work. most of that was around Bridge, Westgate, Alexandra and Gipping. So in year 2, there's quite a lot of planning at the moment, I said, particularly around that CCTV, getting procurement in place, and the youth outreach work is expecting to start later this year. I think that covers the next slide as well. And then in the West, this was a more complicated project in terms of number of interventions. Environmental improvements, so that's things like cutting back trees for visibility, vegetation removal, fly tipping, again, that illegal dumping, addressing that. That was actually completed in year 1. The target hardening, which is the next project, is the police-led project and based on a successful campaign in West Mercia. And this is actually about neighbourhood crime. So most of the project's about antisocial behaviour. This is very much focusing on neighbourhood crime, security advice for householders, vehicles, that kind of thing. So we've got the materials and that's rolling out in the summer. CCTV, as I said, a slightly different approach in terms of deployable cameras, which is quite an interesting approach and I think probably well suited to West Suffolk, in my opinion. So the deployable cameras were first in the nature reserve, the skate park and St Olives. They were the first to benefit, and in year 1 we were already having incidents detected. In year 2 there's already cameras this quarter in Hadley and Needham, and we're due in Haverhill, Newmarket and Mildenhall. The young people's work got going in year 1. There was a reduction in scope, but it sounds like West Suffolk Council have done really well in securing those local funding streams to make up the gap, and through that also ensure sustainability of these projects. I think that was all I wanted to say on the specific projects. We are managing the quarterly reporting to the Home Office, and that does include information on beneficiaries and impact, incidents detected. As I say, at the moment, a lot of it is about planning and getting the interventions in place. We will be looking to do the surveys on impact, so there was quite a lot of work benchmarking done last summer. So, you know, when those surveys are repeated, we'll get intelligence on impact, particularly public perception in their local area. And we'll also be looking at the crime data. I think there's a lot of influences on crime data, but obviously what we're hoping is that these interventions are going to make that difference and bring particularly antisocial behaviour down. So what I'm suggesting to you is that we'll come back after the end of this year and give you another update on where the funding's been spent and that impact information. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Liz. I'm sure we'll be pleased to see you come back after your project's end, and getting an end-of-term report will be very useful to us. Certainly from my point of view, I think the focus on youth is very important, and surely it's stating the obvious to say that it's better to divert people from crime in the first place and let them get into the criminal justice system, because it can be difficult to get out of it and very expensive for the country. Are there any questions for Liz? Comments? Caroline?
Thank you, Liz. That was really helpful. Can I, obviously, as the East Suffolk leader here, I'm just going to go back to the slide on the progress so far on the projects with the interventions with young people. It says, due to losing staff, both providers have pulled out of year 2. We are working now with other providers. And you did mention Catch-22, so is that the new provider, is it?
As I understand it, so the Catch-22 work is out and about in the parts, and that continues. So that's not affected. Access Community Trust and St Giles Trust were providing the initial interventions. I think with these, it was a new intervention up in Lowestoft, so it had to be kind of looked at. So that Q4 intervention had to be looked at whether it was the right intervention. So as I understand it, the negotiation is still with Access Community Trust and St Giles to see whether the intervention can be amended to suit need. I would guess that, that process has to be gone through before looking at other providers. Does that help?
Is it okay if I just come back? So you'll keep us informed, will you, and let us know how it's progressing? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Cliff.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Liz. Really good to hear all that good work going on. Can I just dig a little bit deeper into one or two things? So page 17, that's the West Suffolk, Baber and Mid Suffolk project progress so far. Year 2 progress. So obviously things don't always go to plan, and we will understand things get delayed. I was just wondering how the hotspot areas have been identified, and if you can give us possibly you don't want to be precise about them, but if you can give us a sort of rough idea of where they might be, if that's okay. Thanks.
So back last summer, we used a lot of police data. So in terms for each CSP area, the police came up with a list of like top 10. As I say, they're actually quite specific down to street area. I think rather than do it off the top of my head here, I'm really happy to provide that information. And for West Suffolk, it's quite, and Baber and Mid, it's quite complicated. So there are parts of Stowmarket, Needham, Sudbury in Baber and Mid, and then quite dispersed over in West Suffolk because they are street level. So there's lots of small areas, if that makes sense. What we did with the police data, I think particularly important for antisocial behaviour, was that was overlaid by the local authorities with surveys, going out and about, listening to residents' concern. So for me, and I think all of the people working on the project, it's that local intelligence and particularly perception of where the issues are, which is, it's more qualitative than that quantitative data. But I'm really happy to get you the evidence base that we can, but certainly we can share the geographic areas.
That would be really helpful if you could, Liz. That would be really good. Thank you.
Great. Any final points? In which case...
Very briefly, one thing I forgot to mention, if I may, at the beginning, it was really, really irritating to everybody involved, the prevarication and the flip-flopping approach from the Home Office. You get one fund agreed, then halfway through the application progress, they changed it, and then after we'd all had it agreed, I couldn't believe this, for the sake of saving a few quid in their enormous budget, they changed it again. Really frustrating, caused a lot of extra work for everybody involved. Frankly, it was shambolic, but what a great result in the end. So I just wanted to emphasise we did make various representations to, as I would call them, that lot up in London, but there we are.
Thank you for that intervention. Well, I believe the Home Office is under new management now, and hopefully they will be less shambolic in the future. So thank you, Liz, for that update. And we can move on to item 4, which is Fraud Protect and Prevent Officer. And David Skevington from the police is going to present this, although obviously Tim Passmore will be speaking first.
Thanks. And very, very briefly, I know we discussed this at our planning meeting. I really wanted to emphasise, if I may, this is really important. It's working with training standards. We have already got some funding in place to support this. So the extra funding over the 3 years, you've got the data here. I won't go into that, and I'll leave that to David. But fraud prevention, as you were just saying, Chairman, about preventing crime in the first place is really important. And sadly, this is one of the few areas that the Office of National Statistics doesn't actually count in their crime data for each area for some bizarre reason. But there we are, we've discussed it before. I'll hand over to David, but I hope everybody will support this because this is really about prevention, and the cost of fraud, as you can see from the figures there just locally, is enormous. And we are, I think, nationally way behind the curve on this and have been for many years. And it's about time we stepped up the game collectively. Thank you.
David?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everybody. So there was a paper presented to a previous Suffolk public sector leaders that resulted in £50,000 a year being given for a fraud protect and prevent officer. And the purpose of me being here today is just to update on progress. The key point that I wanted to stress is, though, that what I'm about to say doesn't represent a deviation from this plan, but a proposal to enhance the plan that was submitted on this paper. So the paper spoke about making sure that Suffolk Police had the funding and the ability to recruit a fraud, protect and prevent officer that would be able to protect and prevent fraud against individuals in Suffolk's communities. And a big part of that was to be working in partnership with trading standards. A review following that indication of investment, when added to monies that the constabulary will be receiving through the policing element of the council tax that was secured by the Police and Crime Commissioner a couple of years ago, we think we can do more in terms of the scale of prevention and protection we can afford to people in Suffolk. Meetings with trading standards indicates that we could, through the finance available now, recruit a police member of staff to work alongside a trading standards member of staff that will increase activity that can be done in terms of preventing, talking to community groups, talking to high risk individuals. Last week there was a publication by Ofcom that I found really interesting that talks about 9 out of 10 adults in the country have now encountered suspected scams. And as Tim mentioned, whilst fraud is still underreported, 40% of crime nationally still relates to fraud. And when I think we apply that in the context of Suffolk continues to grow both in terms of numbers, diversify, and we've got an increasing ageing population, I think this represents good investment for money. The final part that I wanted to add in that we didn't update previously, but I think has come to light since, is obviously there is a new government who are talking about a new fraud prevention and protect strategy. Already there are indications about new regulations that they want to apply to financial institutes and telecommunications institutes. Some of that will be very regulatory, but some of that will also be about the ability for sharing more information about vulnerable communities or vulnerable people. So to have the enhanced capacity in Suffolk through trading standards and police working together, we'll hopefully be able to manage that and add capacity and capability to it. So in terms of where we're at, still in the process of making sure that we're ready to kickstart a recruitment campaign to try and recruit both members of staff through both organisations at a similar time. We're trying to do that by Christmas. And then obviously once those staff have been in place, we're going to do some hot evaluation of about 6 months, and then happy to come back with some full evaluation after about a year. So the purpose of the presentation was really to give an update in terms of progress, but set out a desire to add to the original plan that was presented to SPSL, but not deviate from the key principles.
So thank you for that introduction. I would say during the previous discussions on this item, the County Council were very strong, and I'm pleased to see trading standards are involved in this as well. And certainly Nicola Beach spoke, the Chief Exec of the County Council spoke very well on what the county were going to do through trading standards. And it's good to see the police and trading standards working together to tackle this type of crime. It's not that more prevalent crime, but one that can affect individuals very much. Someone who is a victim of that type of fraud doesn't really capture the headlines so much. Are there any other questions or comments on this? Councillor Hicks.
Thanks. Just to say I welcome this. As you've mentioned, Suffolk Trading Standards, we have an outstanding team who do a great job, and they do all they can to protect those in Suffolk from scammers who unfortunately are always trying to take advantage of people and fraud. And in fact, there's only a report I saw last week about someone just being prosecuted for picking on the elderly and the most vulnerable in our county, which is totally despicable. So I think this is a important post, and I think anything we can do to reduce fraud and the impact that has on our residents is important. So I will absolutely be supporting this.
Are there any other questions or comments? Tim Passmore.
Very quickly, when we did have our discussions previously, I did say, assuming this to be successful after 3 years, be happy to baseline that to make sure it's ongoing. We don't want to just do the work for 3 years and then stop it. So I think that's really important to make that absolutely clear. If we can find a way to look at the data, the evidence that it's successful, then we need to make sure it carries on and no doubt improve as the years go on. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is everyone happy that we allocate the funding as requested? Thank you. That is carried. Agenda item 5, housing related support. We now have a request for funding from the SPSL pot for funding to support the transition to a new model for housing related support. I'd like to invite Arthur Charvonia, who's the Chief Executive of Labour and Mid Suffolk, to introduce this request.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief because I'm conscious that this is something that SPSL has looked at previously on a couple of occasions, and I'm sure certainly all of the leaders will have been briefed to the hilt and had conversations at Cabinet. But in summary, what this paper is looking to do, as you said, Chairman, is seek financial support to enable the transition away from a centralised provision for housing-related support to a localised provision for housing-related support in the various areas across Suffolk. The good financial news is that there is one error in recommendation 4. You'll see there under the second bullet point for 4A, the request for £250,000. That should read £150,000. It was originally 250 because we were anticipating some potential consultancy spend, but your officers collectively have been able to do that work themselves, so that's no longer necessary. So the total ask is still the £1 million. That's predominantly coming from the ring-fenced pot that SPSL previously put in place for housing, and then an additional ask of £150,000 to enable that transition, which will take place and come into effect from the start of the next financial year. Happy to take questions.
So thank you for that. And certainly within Ipswich Borough Council, we have already had our local one come through executive, so I'm well aware of this. Are there any other comments? Councillor Waterman.
Thanks very much, Neil. I think all of us were totally understanding of the reasons why Suffolk County Council had to remove this item from their budget. But I think what the outcome of that was, which is that the baton, if you like, has been passed to the District Council, shows the strength of the collaborative working we have here in Suffolk, so that what could have been actually quite a disastrous change for some of our communities, because we've been able to work together, has actually moved the service closer to local people. So I think in a perverse way, we've actually benefited from what looked initially like quite a challenging situation. So I think we can all be happy that we've demonstrated the way of doing things in Suffolk is very effective and works very well for our communities. And I fully support this item. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Yeah, but I mean, certainly the amount of money being put in, it will be. Still here. Oh, it's come back again. I was just going to say, I mean, the Ipswich Borough Council are putting our own money into this service now, but it will be less overall than there was before. So, you know, the service will be less, and perhaps that will drive up homelessness. So, although I'm happy to support this, we have that caveat with it. It won't be as good as it used to be. So, are we all in favour of this one? Yeah. Thank you. And we can move on to agenda item 6. Local Visitor Economy Partnership. A catchy title. We now have a request for funding for investment into the Local Visitor Economy Partnership, LVEP. I'd like to invite Chris Bally, Chief Exec of East Suffolk, to introduce this request.
Thank you, Chair. So, the Local Visitor Economy Partnership is a catchy title, but basically a partnership between Norfolk and Suffolk to promote tourism and the visitor economy across the two counties. And it's a a construct created by Visit England nationally as a way of channeling funds into localities for tourism and the visitor economy. And their preference is for these partnerships to be at significant scale and for areas of similar geography sort of like to come together and work together, hence the Norfolk and Suffolk focus. And we have been working as Visit East of England for a while, maybe not as effectively as we could have, but actually the LVEP and the instigation of that has put a bit of a emphasis on the need to improve that. So the visitor economy is worth about 1.2 billion to Suffolk, 40,000 jobs are provided by it. And in the development of this new partnership, the LVEP, Visit England have confirmed their support for a Norfolk and Suffolk model. Norfolk has committed £110,000 per year for 5 years. Suffolk took the opportunity to do an independent review and look at the options available and committed to, and one of the recommendations was that we match the Norfolk amount, 110,000, for 3 years and then review, although 5 years obviously would put us on parity with Norfolk. So that's kind of like the ask from SPSL today, a commitment of at least 3 years, but ideally 5 years. In terms of conditions that Suffolk has kind of put on membership, and again, this goes to maybe how the partnership has worked in the past. We want much more of a voice on the Visit East of England board or the LVEP board, and you know, an equal voice in the development of a destination plan for Suffolk and Norfolk. Our officers have been working in the background on this, which has been great and very supportive of the new model. And I can vouch for this. So yesterday was the first workshop with Visit England, just to look at LVEPs across Norfolk and Suffolk, and Suffolk was equally represented in the room as Norfolk, with tourism businesses, local authority representation from the county council, and myself, as well as others. And it was a very helpful session, and very much an identity that this isn't necessarily about the East of England or even Norfolk and Suffolk, that we are a collection of tourist destinations. So Visit Newmarket were in the room yesterday, and the Suffolk Coast Destination Management Organisation was in the room yesterday as well. So very much a collection of great places to visit that we have in the East. So yeah, so the ask is for SPSL to contribute to the LVEP.
So thanks for that. As the papers are printed, it's for a 3-year contribution, right? But are you asking for a 5-year contribution?
Yeah, I think the options that were presented in our independent review was a minimum of 3 years with a review. I mean, a commitment to 5 years would show a like-for-like match and would demonstrate commitment, I think, to the new LVEP and kind of like get Suffolk more of a seat at the table, as it were.
Okay, certainly at the Suffolk Business Board yesterday, there was a lot of talk about improving the visitor economy. You know, it's an important part, as you say, 1.2 billion. Are there any questions, comments from around the table? Tim Passmore.
Thank you, Neil. Now, I think it's a very good idea. And I mean, of course, we've got to at least match Norfolk. I say it in jest, but we can't possibly allow them to have one over us. But no, I think it's a really important initiative, because tourism, the visitor economy, is one of those huge industries that can really expand and provide more employment, generate wealth and so on relatively quickly. And I think looking after it is important to promote what we have here, because there's no such destination per se in tourism as the East of England and so on. So I think it's about the overall concept that's really, really important. I certainly think giving a commitment 5 years subject to review after 3 years, if we want to adjust the proposals or something, well, that's absolutely fine. And just another thing from the policing side, we can help. One of the things we're considering for our new police and crime plan is a small policing safety awareness for tourism, not vast resources, but again, to look at some of the issues of dealing and preventing crime to make the visitor economy more attractive, because there's that very clear link between higher levels of deprivation and increased levels of crime, abuse antisocial behaviour and addiction. So from our point of view, something like this is very, very welcome indeed, and I absolutely support it. More power to your elbow. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hicks.
Yeah, thanks. Absolutely support. I'm quite happy to go with 5 years with a review at 3 and just see how it's progressing. But I think our paper is really clear about the return on investment and how it'll be measured. And, it talks about equal and equality with Norfolk in loads of different areas by us matching them. And I would hate us to fall behind. In fact, I'd rather we were ahead. But obviously, it's important that we're both in there and we have fair representation. So I think it's vital we actually do this.
Okay, any other? David.
I better check first. Am I allowed to ask a question? Is that okay? It was just a thought. Really, I really like this. The strategic recovery themes, are they set in stone? Because it talks about community safety, but could that be broadened to community and road safety? I'm thinking at a time when the number of visitors are using a road, that gives us opportunity for promoting safe and effective travel. Is that something that could be considered? That's the question.
Chris?
Yes, so I think the strategic recovery themes actually go back to COVID, and they were the themes that we adopted as public sector leaders to make sure that the projects that we brought forward were addressing some of those community recovery themes. So I don't see any reason why road safety can't be built into the development of that proposal. I think that the workshop yesterday was very interesting because you've obviously got a sector of businesses who are very interested in LVEPs and what it will bring for them, and you've got destinations that are interested. But there was lots of discussion about things like policing, transport, skills. And the availability of workforce as well, and that's one of the benefits of a sort of like a larger partnership is maybe to work with across the whole of the east of England on some of those issues.
Yeah. Any other questions or points? So, in the report, it's a 3-year, and we're all happy with 3 years. So, in terms of moving to a 5-year, as Matthew suggests, 5 years with a review at 3 years. Would that be acceptable, Chris, to the LVEP?
Very much so.
Yeah, but how do we, if we have a review at 3 years and want to get out of it, how do we get out of it then? Have we really committed to 5 years?
Well, I think we would say 5 years with a review at 3 years to demonstrate the commitment. But I would imagine if the review at 3 years says we'd like to get out of it, then something's gone quite badly wrong with the proposal. So I would imagine there'll be a clear reason why we would not want to proceed with an LVEP. I think again, giving it a 5-year longevity will provide a little bit more momentum and confidence in the model.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we all in favour of that then? 5 years. So we're going to amend the recommendation to say that we will 5 years with a review after 3. Okay. And I'm assuming that, Chris, you'll bring a report to this group about how the money's been spent? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll make sure that we keep it. There's a Suffolk tourism group which the officers are working together on with, and then there's a Norfolk group, and then they work together. Board representation. There will be, I think, the cabinet members from Norfolk County and Suffolk County will be involved in that. And the other sort of like the other board members will be sort of like from DMOs and from some of the businesses, and then there's an officer working group where we'll play into.
Excellent. Are we all happy with that? That is carried. So agenda item 7 is the budget update, and I'll now invite Ian Gallen to present an update on our budget.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief. So you've got in front of you the budget as it stood before the meeting started, and we'll obviously update that now following the funding decisions you've made today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on the budget? So thank you, Ian, for that update. So that concludes the business for today's meeting. Thank you for coming, and I hope anyone watching online found it interesting. We'll see you next time. Thank you.